Welcome to Edu Tools. Today we are going to be doing a Life in Nazi Germany revision. This is the OCR specification for exams. If you're doing OCR, this is the right video for you. You have come to the right place. Um, I would advise if you use flashcards or any paper to take down notes so that you can use this for revision. This is everything you ever need to know for the exams. So yeah, I'm going to start now. We're going to start with Unit 1, Dictatorship. The Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919. So there was four aspects to this. Land. Land was taken away from Germany and given to some neighboring countries as a punishment. Army. Army was reduced from Germany to about 100,000 men. Money. Germany had to pay a fine of $6.6 billion dollars in reparation. Blame. Germany had to take all the blame for starting WW1. This is also known as the LAMP acronym, so that's easy for you to revise. So, um, Hitler also faced some opposition to World War II. There was the public criticism, so many examples came from the church. Cardinal Galen, in 1941, he delivered three famous sermons denouncing the use of terror by Gestapo. The taking of a church property was one of the famous sermons he delivered. Sermons were printed and illegally distributed. One of them was called Lion of Munster. He survived the war and was too prominent a figure to be eliminated, but lived under virtual house arrest from 1941 to 1945. So there was also leaflets and postcards, which was another form of public criticism. Some chose to distribute anti-Nazi texts to alert people. Many examples of this came from the youth. So the White Rose was a group of students who decided to print out anti-Nazi leaflets, and in January 1943, the fifth letter was produced, and it was called Appeal to All Germans. The leaflet stated, Hitler cannot win the war, he can only prolong it. So 6,000 to 9,000 leaflets were distributed, and on 18th of February in 1943, souls were arrested. Sophie and Hans faced people courts and execution. So, we are now going to look at the hate of communism. Hitler blamed the communists for all of Germany's problems since he was a capitalist. A communist is basically somebody that has value in society, somebody that believes that all of a country's wealth should be shared out equally, but a capitalist believes that in a capitalist society, there's only certain people that have the wealth, and then the other people might be middle income or low income. So this basically, we can use UK as an example of a capitalist society. Most of the world's countries are capitalist countries. So, Lebensraum, Lebensraum, living space. Germany needed more land, so the German people wanted to colonize places. For example, Poland, due to the fact that they lost World War One and had to sign the Treaty of Versailles in 1919, and one of the punishments were that German land was taken away and given to some neighboring countries, for example, France. Aryan supremacy. Want to mention were known as the non-Aryans. These people were considered as the superior race. For example, Jewish and Slavic people, also Gypsies, were included. Mentioned were the Aryans, blonde hair and blue-eyed people, seen as superior to all other races. Brot und Arbeit, bread and work. Hitler promised German citizens bread and work if they voted him in as dictator. German citizens were devastated by a Wall Street crash, which happened in 1929 to 1933 because lots of people were starving and unemployed since Germany had to repay USA on the loan they took, and the German citizens ended up suffering because there was low government funding as a result of Germany having to repay USA. Hitler promised bread and work and locals were pleased. This shows good leadership. Step 1. Removing the communists. The Reichstag fire. 27th of February 1933. Arsonists identified as young Dutch communist Van der Loop. Sounds false because it's deemed as impossible, since how can one person start a big fire? Nazis used the opportunity to blame Communist Party for trying to ignite to start the Civil War. Hitler used this to his advantage and contacts President Hindenburg and persuaded him to give him emergency powers to release 6 decrees the next day of Reichstag fire. Reichstag fire decree. Following week, 4,000 communists arrested, including Ernst Wallmann, the Communist Party leader. Communist press and meetings were also banned. Hitler has legally eradicated opposition political party, the Communists. Emergency power passed by Hindenburg led to destruction of communism. Hitler has legally eradicated opposition political party, the Communists. Step 2. Removing German democracy. The Enabling Act was passed on 24th of March 1933. Cabinet and Chancellor officer given consent control of Parliament. Most of the debating chamber surrounded by SA soldiers and Nazi party as an act of intimidation with communist leaders locked up following the fire. Only 94 Social Democrats against Act and 444 members voted for the law to pass. They effectively disbanded democracy and German Reichstag. Hitler is now legal dictator of Germany. Step 3. Bringing Germany into line. Civil Service Act, 7th of April 1933. On 7th of April, all civil servants sacked who opposed the Nazis. February 1933, Hitler became Chancellor and many high-ranking civil servants were removed from their posts. Civil Service Act was the official encouragement of anti-Semitism. 1st April 1933, Civil Service Act removed Jewish people from civil service. April 1933, further legislation restricted the number of Jews studying in universities. In the same month, further laws prevented Jewish activity in legal and medical jobs. 1st April 1933, Nazis organized day-long boycotts of Jewish businesses. Anti-Semitic signs were put on shop fronts and SA guards stood outside shops to discourage people from entering. Book burning. 10th of May 1933, in universities and cities across Germany, Nazi students burnt 25,000 volumes of un-German books for use of terror. 1933, up to 600 Jewish communists, social democrats and trade unions murdered. October 1933, more than 100,000 were arrested, many imprisoned in concentration camps by SA and set up all over Germany, first at Dachau concentration camp in March 1933. June 1933, Kopernik Week of Blood. A social democrat shot 3 stormtroopers. In retaliation, the SA arrested 500 men and tortured them so severely that 91 died. Step 4. Removing opposition. Trade union. Majority of unions in 1933 were against Nazi party and ideology. February 1933, Nazis arrested main union leaders. Other political parties. Before 1932, Social Democrats had been largest party. 10th of May, Nazis claimed there had been corrupt use of SD funds and so seized all 50 offices and wealth, many leaders fleeing. 21st of June, Frick used emergency decree to ban SD. Total 3,000 party workers arrested, imprisoned and tortured. Other laws. Controlling local government. 1934, power of local governments removed. The People's Court, separate court placed outside of the justice system. The Night of the Long Knives. 1934. Rome started to openly criticize Hitler and once called him the ridiculous corporal to men. Rome and other SA leaders were tricked into. Sorry for that. Let me go back. So Rome and other SA leaders were tricked into going to a hotel outside Munich for a special meeting which didn't take place. Hitler SS officers, Goebbels and others entered the hotel, arrested SA leadership and sent them to prison. Many were killed. Rome given option to commit suicide but refuses, and 2 days after arrest he was brutally murdered by 2 SS officers. In total, at least 85 people, 12 of prominent Reichstag deputies were murdered. Life in Nazi Germany, Unit 2, Control and Opposition. Himmler and his role. He led the SS Protection Squadron, which were numbered over 50,000. Under Himmler, they were developing the methods of surveillance and terror, which would gain them notoriety. The SS would go on to be one of the defining features of Nazi Germany, running the concentration camps and spying on people. Joseph Goebbels and his role. He coordinated the propaganda team and was given overall charge of a party's propaganda machine in 1929. 1933 through 1945, Goebbels was appointed Minister of Enlightenment and Propaganda. Films, for example, The Eternal Jew, A Black black/white film expressed anti-Semitic message of a party, Triumph of the Will portrayed the might of Hitler and Germany. Goebbels demanded total war from the Germans, and in 1944 he was appointed Reich Commissioner for Total Mobilization. The police state, SD, main official intelligence gathering agency whose role was to identify actual or potential Nazi enemies. Gestapo, secret police which worked alongside the SD to remove any opposition. Police, worked under SS and were encouraged to join its forces. Judges and courts. Judges had to swear an oath to Hitler and sentences became more severe. Concentration camps. Early years. Over 70 camps made in 1933 to imprison 45,000 communists, trade unionists, and other opponents. These camps had extreme punishments. Propaganda. Newspapers. 1939. Nazis owned 213 all German censorship. Journalists forced to join Right Association of Press, newspapers and magazines. Radio, 1939. 70% of Germany had a radio at home. This was the highest percentage at the time. The receivers were, however, weak, and this meant no foreign media. Rallies, 1934. There was an annual party at Nuremberg, which was the largest in the whole world. 500 trains carried 250,000 people to a specially built railway station. 30,000 swastika flags were placed around the field. Giant rallies were held to emphasize and celebrate the strength of the Nazi movement. Posters, propaganda used to promote Aryan race and indoctrinate people of their superiority. The NDSP is an example. Berlin Olympics, 1936. German newspaper made Germany look internationally accepted despite anti-Semitic signs which had to be taken down. Film, 1944. Right cinema laws. All scripts were pre-censored. This stopped films which criticized Nazis. Goebbels realized overly political films wouldn't be popular, so limited this to only 10% films made. The Eternal Jew was a propaganda film made to show how evil Jewish people were. Jokes. 1934. Law passed which punished people for saying anything bad about Nazis. For example, Hitler and Göring are standing on top of Berlin's radio tower. Hitler says he wants to do something to cheer up Berlin, and someone says, "Why don't you just jump?" The person who suggested that was in prison. Life in Nazi Germany. Unit 3. Changing Lives. Economy. The RAD was set up to tackle unemployment by providing cheap labour. The DAF was a German workforce. KDF, strength through joy, rewarded workers' hard work. Volkswagen scheme. Tokens were given to get Volkswagen cars by the end of the war. However, the cars were not received. Hidden unemployment. Unemployment officially reduced to 35,000. Compulsory military conscription. 500,000 workers were ordered to become soldiers. Many men worked in arms factories and were replaced with untrained workers. Peasants, forced owners to pass land to eldest son rather than divide it up between brothers and sell it. 1933 law to protect retail trade was passed, which increased taxes on larger stores to protect small businesses. Opposition. How great a threat was it? Church. Martin Niemöller, Paul Schneider, Pope Pius XI, Cardinal Galen, Jehovah's Witnesses. Martin Niemöller preached against Nazi policy. Over 800 pastors were arrested and sent to concentration camps. Cardinal von Galen. 1934, his sermons began to criticize the Nazi regime over its racial policy. The Gestapo was sent to question Galen, but he was too high profile to remove from power or persecute. Therefore, the resistance continued. Pope Pius XI. July 1933, Hitler made an agreement called the Concordat with Pope Pius XI, leader of the Catholic Church. This meant that Catholics would stay out of politics if in return the Nazis would leave them alone. However, in 1937, Hitler changed his mind. The Pope wrote a letter with burning anxiety, which was smuggled into Germany and read out in all Catholic churches on Palm Sunday. The letter condemned Nazi beliefs and methods. The next day, Gestapo raided every Catholic church, seizing all copies of the letter. In the following months, the Nazis intensified their actions against the church. There was about 22 million Catholics and 40 million Protestants, and some other smaller denominations. They were by far the largest Nazi organization. Their teachings and beliefs were about love and forgiveness. Hitler saw this as a threat, since Nazi ideals were most hateful and violent. For example, the Dachau concentration camp was the first ever camp made for Jewish people and was made in 1933. Opposition. How great a threat was it? Youth groups: swing kids, Edevice, pirates, young communists, and Christians. 1933 to 1939, young people provided the most opposition to the regime. However, they were a minor threat since they were mainly local based and not nationwide or widespread. They only didn't agree with the Nazis, refused to conform, so they were no particular threat to the Nazis. 2.5 million Christian youth organizations in Germany. However, in 1933, they were banned by the Nazis. Hitler only wanted the Nazi youth group members. Autumn 1942, Otto and Elise Hampel wrote 200 postcards urging people to refuse military service. All were handed into the Gestapo, showing the fear of the public, and they were executed in April 1943. Women's lives, did they really change? Aims create were created to aims were create policies to encourage motherhood by the Nazis. What did they do? Attitude towards women. By the 1920s, under Weimar government, women had made progress. For example, by 1933, there were 100,000 women teachers and 3,000 doctors. Women aged 20 plus could vote, and 1 out of 10 of Reichstag members were female. 1938, it was easier to get a divorce if a man or woman couldn't have children. The German Women's Enterprise organized class and radio talks on household topics. Nazi views on how women should live. Women shouldn't smoke, higher chance of miscarriage. Therefore, women shouldn't have women should have natural beauty because no makeup and hair dyes were seen as a French obsession. Women should dress modest and in traditional German clothes. Once a month, women had to participate in a one-pot Sunday, making a stew from leftovers. Essay and block orders checked women were fulfilling this duty. Women should be thick and robust. Strong women best for childbearing. Women should be National Socialist Women League members. This was led by Gertrude Scholz-Klink. 2 million members were in 1938 in the National Socialist Women's League membership. So this league offered meetings, bi-weekly magazine, and domestic duties training, for example, cooking. Policy to encourage motherhood. 1. Loans to encourage motherhood. Nazi government decided to encourage young women to get married and have children, and in 1933, it didn't work. In 1933, they didn't want the women to work. Sorry for that. In example, couples could receive goods of up to 1,000 Reichsmarks if women gave up her job and agreed not to return to work until loan repaid. This stimulated German manufacturing. The loan could take up to 8 years to be repaid, so women most likely to totally avoid working. Loan reduced by 1/4 every time women gave birth. This encouraged childbearing, and couples with 4 children didn't need to have any more children. 2. Making divorce and remarriage easy. Divorces were made easier. Women could remarry and have more children. 3. Reducing opportunities for women in higher education. Women's acceptance into higher education was very low. Female enrollment at universities were limited to only 10% of all students. The impact of Nazi policies on women's lives. Did it change? Marriages increased from 516,000 in 1932 to 772,000 in 1939. Births rose in the early 1930s to 1939. However, the rate did decline again. Average number of children per couple in 1932 was 3.6, and by 1939 it was 3.3. Number of women in employment increased. 1933 to 1939, agriculture industry rose from 2.7 to 3.3 million. Number of women in higher education fell. Number of women at German universities significantly dropped in this period. However, the Nazi government ended up regretting the success. Late 1930s, highly qualified women needed to take on work caused by rapid rearmament program, which was for war preparation. However, women were very reluctant to take university places due to being discouraged from doing so since 1933. Treatment of the Jewish people. Key dates to remember is Nuremberg Laws, September 1935. Jewish people were no longer considered citizens and therefore no longer had any human rights due to this law being passed. And also the other date was Kristallnacht, November 1938. All Jewish children are expelled from non-Jewish state schools. Jews no longer allowed to buy newspapers and magazines. Jews banned from running retail or wholesale businesses. Controlling the youth. Did this really work? So the Nazis' aims were to indoctrinate youths with Nazi ideologies. What did they do? Hitler Youth and Education. Hitler Youth Group. In 1936, Hitler Youth Group was the only organization young people could access sports facilities and activities. Boys and girls meetings were primarily focused on physical activities and indoctrination. Political songs were sang, Nazi books read, and they paraded through the towns commonly. Boys' activities often focused on military preparation, and girls' activities were focused on domestic duties. In education in 1933, politically unreliable teachers were forced to resign, leaving only those who'd follow Nazi orders. In Berlin, 30% of her head teachers were fired. National Socialist Nazi Teachers League. 97% of teachers in Germany joined it by 1936, and in 1939, only 6,173 pupils were schooled at the 16 Napoleon and 10 Adolf Hitler schools. Did it change? Compared to pre-1936, parents upset, children under parents' persuasion. If parents were anti-Nazi, children would be too, despite attending Nazi youth group. Life in Nazi Germany, Unit 4, Germany in War. Role of women, World War II. Women now encouraged to work in factories to boost production. Hitler and others still believed they should stay at home and continue their roles as wives and mothers. In 1939, 760,000 women worked in war industries. Bombing and bombing, sorry for that, but bombing and evacuation. Spring 1940, the war economy led to serious food shortages. Rationing was introduced. Positives: people allocated points according to their age and occupation and given color-coded ration cards for different products. This allowed most people to be adequately fed during the war. Negatives: Jewish ration cards marked with red J, and they were given lower allocations and only allowed to shop at certain times, half an hour before the store closed, and goods were nearly gone usually. Product quality was reduced. People who complained were reported to local authorities. Shortages. Spring 1940, the war economy led to serious food shortages. Rationing was introduced. Um, why am I reading that again? Sorry for that. Albert Speer wrote on the war economy. He was appointed as Minister of Armaments in February 1942. April 1942, the Central Planning Board was created. His main policies were to focus factories on producing single products, employ more women in factories, use concentration camp prisoners as workers, exclude skilled workers from compulsory military service. War economy. In 1939, 23% of goods produced in German factories related to military. By 1941, this had risen to 47%. 1941, 55% of German workforce was employed in war-related work. War economy not materialized by the end of 1941 due to inefficiency and lack of central control. When was the move to total war? December 1939, all of Germany became a war economy. How did the war affect ordinary people? People had to receive food tickets. Jewish people were excluded from society and given whatever food was left in supermarkets. Furthermore, the German people faced frequent air strikes. Okay, this is the last unit we're going to cover in life in Nazi Germany. Unit 5, Occupation. Okay, experienced by Hungarians. Hungarian Jewish people were shipped to the concentration camp. They were the greatest number of Auschwitz victims, sadly. How did people react? Resistance example was Andrei Chokmay. He was a Protestant pastor and pacifist. In December 1940 through September 1944, he arranged for Jewish people, mainly children, to be hidden in the region around Chambon, Lignon. In February 1943, Chokmay was arrested and released after 28 days due to a lack of evidence. Late 1943, he had to go into hiding himself for the rest of the war due to fear of further arrest. June 1943, 5 children deported to Auschwitz. September 1944, around time Chambon-sur-Lignon was liberated. Chokmay and other villages had saved 5,000 Jewish people. Successful. This was a successful thing done. You might have to do an 18 marker discussing about was attempts to accommodate successful or assessing collaboration and all them stuff. In the link in the description, I will leave some revision tools you can use. I've made these styles into flashcards, and I've left some past papers and even a quiz so that to test your knowledge that you've if you've accumulated all the knowledge given in these revision sessions. So yeah, be sure to check out the description, and I'm gonna continue this lesson now. So how do people react? Collaboration example, Coco Chanel. 1941, she tried to persuade authorities to remove Jewish directors of her perfume company and give her sole ownership as an Aryan. She was taking advantage of anti-Semitic Nazi policies. How do people react? Accommodation example, Ringo Blom. 1940s, Ringo Blom formed a collection of documents as a testimony for future generations. At great risk, he formed a secret organization which began collecting diaries, papers, and posters. Sorry for that. Experience in Netherlands. Oh, I don't know why this is acting up. Sorry about that. Experience in Netherlands, 1943, 107,000 Jewish people, 76% of total Jewish population of Netherlands deported by Nazis. April 1943, 300,000 Dutch ex-soldiers transported to Germany to work as forced labourers. Brutal Nazi response to strikes across the country led to 95 people being killed and 400 wounded. 1941, 300,000 men in hiding, almost 20,000 resistance members arrested, around 2,000 members of Dutch resistance executed. Experience in Poland, 1940. Himmler made the Eastern General Plan to remove as many Polish/Slavic people as possible and replace them with Germans. Hundreds of thousands of native Polish citizens were expelled, and 500,000 ethnic Germans were settled in their houses and on their lands. May 1940, schools and universities were closed. Around 30,000 of the most talented people in Poland were arrested. Many were tortured and murdered. 1.9 million non-Jews killed by Wehrmacht and SS. Other Poles sent to work in Germany through forced labor schemes between 1939 and 1945. Over 1.5 million were deported and forced to work in labor camps. Okay. I don't know why I skipped experience. Oh yeah, we already did that. Sorry. The Holocaust. End of 1945. World War II. Nazis murdered 1 million people, including Jewish people, Slavs, Gypsies, communists, and homosexuals. Jewish people killed and also put in gas showers. So this is the end of the lesson. If this video has helped you, well, it surely has, because it covered everything you ever need to know. And if you know this information, you're gonna undoubtedly succeed in the exams. You just have to practice papers and questions. And yeah, in the link below, as I've already mentioned previously, that I'm leaving a link below in the description that will give you all the revision material as quiz. For example, the quiz. I'm even gonna link this video inside the document. I'm also gonna link the flashcards, and yeah, I already said practice papers. So yeah, you guys just check the document, and you're gonna do very well. Exceedingly abundantly well. So yeah, this is the end of the video. Just practice, and you will make it there. And yeah, this is the end of today's lesson, revision session on Nazis. And yeah, this is the only thing you ever need for Nazis. Okay. So yeah, bye.